All right, what's going on, everyone? Joined today by Nick Laidlaw, who is somewhat recently back from Ukraine, documenting stories in a book he wrote recently
hmm
uh, from all over the battlefield, civilians, soldiers alike. And I know in the past you've had a lot of interactions with not just Ukrainian, but Russian soldiers. So I'm excited to hear about the trip, excited to hear how it went, and what you got coming up. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So the trip was something, it kind of just happened. Um, so I remember anyone who's followed Battles and Beers for a while now knows like I've been talking pretty consistently to both sides. Social media is not very forgiving of sharing the Russian perspective. A lot of the times I'll upload something from them and it'll get taken down. So most of the time I just don't even bother anymore. I'm still documenting them and putting them in books and stuff like that. But as far as like publishing Russian stories on social media, it's just not something I really do anymore. But the trip was, I remember, I think it was the very beginning of September. Um, I just kind of woke up one day and I was like, I think I need to go to Ukraine, like, because I had no like really ambitions to go before that. Um, I was getting plenty of stories documented online before that. I'd like tons, like some days I was getting like 15 interviews done. Um, just because a soldier would pass the phone around to all his friends and it was like boom, boom, boom,
Wow.
boom. Yeah. But then I remember like seeing these pictures, like these very vivid pictures of dead Russian soldiers and like wounded Ukrainians near the village of Lyman in eastern Ukraine, or not, yeah, Lyman or Izium, one of the two. And I remember thinking like I've got to go. Um, Something just like woke up in me, and I was like, "Yep, I got to go." So I slowly started forming this very rough plan of how to get there and what I need and all that stuff. And a whole bunch of people were very helpful. Atlas Global Aid stepped forward. They're a nonprofit working in Ukraine. Um, and they basically paid for my plane ticket. They paid for my lodging.
Dang.
They found me an awesome translator and a good trip manager who was with us all the time. And then I went over with a buddy from the Marine Corps, and he actually quit his job to come with me. Just if anything happened, there'd be one person in Ukraine who just wouldn't leave me behind. And then Project Leaflet as well, the admin of that, Chris, he went over with me as well to do photography and take pictures and stuff like that.
So I want to go
Um,
back to something there real quick.
mhm,
Had you been documenting, because we've talked previously how you put together stories from like Viet Cong during the Vietnam
mhm.
War, as well as a lot of American stories and German soldiers from World War II, as well as a lot of American stories. Had you done anything around this conflict pre February invasion?
Yeah. So like I think November timeframe, I started to kind of build a network of soldiers in Ukraine and civilians and stuff like that. Because I had a feeling like some at some time in the future, Ukraine is going to be in the news a lot, and so I should probably dig as much as I can. So like if something big happens, I've got a list of contacts to pull from. And I actually had an interesting like dialogue going between a Russian soldier who is north of the border of Ukraine and then a Ukrainian soldier who is in the trenches across from them basically. And they were like communicating to each other through me, and it was pretty crazy. And that's kind of when like I got like the like Ukraine's like the this whole situation got its hooks in me, where I was like, okay, I need to invest in this more. I need to invest more of my time and spend greater efforts building these relationships and stuff like that. And I remember right when the invasion started, I will argue I was probably within the first 100 Westerners, including people in our government, to know that like, yep, it had started. Because like as soon as the rockets and missiles started flying and the tanks started rolling across the border, I was getting text messages like it's happening sort of thing. And I went right to work. And so I was texting contacts I know in Kharkiv now and Sumy and in Mariupol and Odessa, like all the major cities. I was like texting, like, what's going on? What are you seeing? Sort of thing. And it was pretty crazy. And those first couple weeks of the war were insane. You can really see it in the book too. The stories are a lot shorter. They're a lot more condensed because people were they seemed shocked as to what was going on. Whereas like later in the book, like mid book, the stories are a lot longer. They're a lot more detailed, and you can tell they're more thought out. But right in the beginning, the stories I was documenting, like the night of February 24th, they were like, the Russians are bombing my house. Like it's insane. And the story would be like 2-3 sentences long. And you can really see the shock in people there.
So the book Nick's talking about what war did to us is the first period of time of this war.
Mm-hmm.
Again, February invasion on. So um, it's not like lessons learned from the war that we're not going to really parse out for decades. This is like he's saying that the individual accounts of this is what it was like in the trenches the night before. But if you're talking to guys on both sides, how do you figure out like where that line is to not like that made me anxious when you said that because I'm thinking one of my soldiers sitting there texting some dude with the Taliban and and you don't know what they're going to say that they shouldn't say and I can't imagine. It's incredible that they trust you enough to engage at baseline. How do you figure out that line of not sharing information that both sides probably want to know?
Yeah, so I rely a lot on the training we got in the Marine Corps for that, like the what is it, like Operation Purple Dragon or something like that. Like whenever it's the Marines will know. It was a Marine Net class that we all had to take every year. But basically I think when I'm talking to someone, if they're giving me information and it's like, okay, they've given me their name, their unit, and like basically like an 8-digit grid of where they are and what they're going to be doing, I keep that to myself. I pride myself in just delivering the story and making it as unusable for the enemy as possible. So, with a lot of guys, when they give me stories, especially like if it's like an ongoing event, um, I will redact a lot of information from it. So I'll redact their name, I'll redact their unit, I'll redact the location. Sometimes I'll even redact like what front it's on. Like you can, and it's not even something like I can even pull at a later date. It's like I'll delete the Instagram messages, like everything. I change my password on there all the time because early war, I did have a ton of attempted like logins and stuff from all
Really?
over the
I was
world.
going to ask
Yeah.
that.
Yep. Especially after I documented a story about Russian conscripts being told they were going to go train and they ended up in Ukraine. And so I got a lot of like login attempts after that, assuming from the other side. But
I don't know. Never know.
yeah, so I work very hard to keep identities as anonymous as possible and to leave as much pertinent information that could be used to gain an upper hand in a war out of stories.
Do you ever not publish something immediately thinking this needs because the situation in the battlefield is developing or I'm thinking like location of a high
Mhm.
Mars, it might be too much to give that away. We'll wait 2 weeks kind of thing.
Yep. So like when Ukrainian soldiers and stuff got the M777 artillery cannons, I was talking to a crew during that, and they were sending me like pictures and stuff like that of like, oh look, we're practicing on the guns and stuff like that, and they were like, yeah, we're gonna be training, and then we should be ready to deploy by like X date, and it was like,
Yeah.
I don't tell me this,
Yeah. Guys, come on.
you
For
know,
both sides,
and
you're not supposed to be sharing that kind of stuff.
yeah, so I work pretty hard to keep everyone as safe as I can. Like I said, I'm not like at least for Battles and Beers, I'm not picking a side. I have my own thoughts and opinion on who's right or who's wrong in this war, of like who I personally support, but I keep as much of that out of Battles and Beers as I can.
And Battles and Beers is Nick's Instagram account. We'll share that in the
Mhm.
description. It's awesome. The amount of information, videos, a lot. I saw one recently, or maybe it's just the feed was old, like an in-law attack from early in the war.
Yeah,
Was that a
Mariupol.
new was that a new video or just
No,
someone talking back
that's an
then?
old video.
Yeah.
It was an old interview that I had conducted with a soldier in Mariupol, and he talked about blowing up a tank with an NLAW.
Jesus. Um, so that I agree. I really like the approach of just documenting what's happening. I try to do my best in that same regard, where just get the information out, and then people can make decisions or learn about what's happening without an overt spin. But you also said at the beginning you've kind of stopped documenting Russian stories because they're being taken down on social. How, what do you think's happening there? Because like the overt misinformation, propaganda stuff, I got it, but that's probably not what you were putting down when a soldier's talking about life in the trenches.
Yeah, and a lot of it isn't even like stuff that would like hurt one side or the other. It's literally just like a guy's experience. And I think the biggest problem with sharing like Russian stories is literally the troll farms. And it's not that like pro-Ukrainians get upset that, I'm documenting a Russian story. A lot of them are pretty open-minded, where like, yes, like the two nations are at war, but like both sides, it needs to be documented. Okay. Like if
It's a
you,
soldier talking about missing his family and stuff like
yeah,
that.
and that's usually what it is. But it's like the Russian troll farms just try to suppress like any firsthand information
Really,
from coming out. Yeah. And it's
I didn't think of it
usually,
from that direction.
yeah, that was what I was really surprised about. And of course, like you get the pro-Ukrainians who like report the post or whatever, get it taken down. And for some of this, I am speculating, but I do see a lot of like comments and stuff from people who are clearly like from a troll farm, stuff like that. And it's interesting to read through, but yeah, it is very difficult to upload stories from the Russian side. That's why I just saved 99.9% of them for the book.
Okay.
Also on my way to Ukraine, once I decided to go to Ukraine to document the war from the Ukrainian perspective, because I'm not just going to walk across no man's land to go talk to the Russians.
Yeah.
But once I did decide to go to Ukraine, I did stop seeking out and speaking with Russian soldiers just for the peace of mind of Ukrainian soldiers when I got there. I didn't want them to like look at me and have me approach them to document a story and then like, but aren't you talking to the Russians as well? Like you get what I'm saying? So it was
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
even
So
having had those contacts in the past, I feel like could open some skepticism.
yeah, and
Um,
it definitely has. But most people can scroll through Battles and Beers and they can see the stories that get uploaded on there. And I think most of them see the value in what I am doing and the documentation of it all. Especially for some of these bigger battles like Mariupol and stuff. I documented a lot of um, last words, if you will, and I was communicating to a lot of the husbands from the wives and stuff like that. I was the middleman for a lot of the communication once it was the they were surrounded in Azovstal in the steel plant there.
do you think of yourself as a journalist? I just realized that's probably what you are, and I've never thought of you like that. I don't know, not in a bad
Personally,
way.
no, personally, no. I consider just myself like a carrier pigeon, if you will. Just one guy is telling me a story about what he experienced, and I just relay that to other people. Some people want to call it journalism. That's fine. But personally, no. I think I am more a curator of stories,
I guess
and yeah.
the reason I was thinking about that was I was going to ask what your experience was once you got on the ground in Ukraine, because I was going to say, what's it like as a journalist, a Western journalist on the ground, and then realize, I don't know, I don't think Nick's a journalist. Nick's just a guy. So yeah, what was the experience like on the ground? Could you go where you wanted? Was it rather restrictive? What's that like trying to gather that information?
Yep. So the first thing I needed to do to go report in Ukraine was get my media accreditation. And so it's like you submit like a picture of yourself, who you are, who you work for, and you need like a letter of recommendation. And then like the Ukrainian I don't remember the name of it, but their intelligence service does like a background check on you. And then they'll issue you or deny you your press pass. And your press pass paired with like an American passport is kind of like the golden ticket to get wherever you need to go. But most of the time I didn't even need to show it. I would just because I at least was with some Ukrainian service members, and so they would just say the password in the evening, and I would just get through the checkpoints. But there were a couple times I was really surprised that I didn't like I was not stopped or talked to or questioned about my camera. There was one time I literally just walked onto a military base and started interviewing people. Yeah, and they're like, "Oh, you can, yeah, sure, talk to whoever you want. Just don't take pictures over there or over there because it can be geolocated easily." They are very cognizant about that of pictures being geolocated, especially for bases and stuff like that. I was driving past a block post in Kiev, and I took a picture of it, and this dumb tourist,
Yeah,
and they stopped the car, and I was like, oh, fuck, like I'm gonna have
that was the
my
wrong
like
move.
really expensive camera confiscated or something like that. And Ukrainian police stopped, and they were like, you can't take pictures here, blah blah blah. And my friend who went with me is a cop as well in the United States, and he like showed him his badge, and he's like, "Oh, it's okay, we're American cops." And they're like, "Oh, you're a cop, you're police," and they wanted to get pictures with him and stuff. And it ended up really well. It was a good meeting, and I interviewed one of the cops there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it was a good impromptu interview. But yeah, you can journalists have a lot of freedom in Ukraine. You can basically go wherever you want. Some of the frontline areas you need specific permission from the commander to be able to go there, but most of the time like you just walk around. Like if you want to go to Bakhmut right now, if you've got the balls to drive into the city, you can go.
Jesus. I
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm guilty of thinking that the United States does things right, especially in the military perspective. And when somebody else does it, it's just a different way. Like maybe it works for them. So I'm thinking about this press piece of media just showing up on bases, and that is not at all what you would have experienced in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not even close, right? We knew they were coming days ahead of time, and like we would hide some of our soldiers because not because they would say something bad about the mission, but because they just wouldn't stop talking about like something like X-rated at home, right? Like the
Yeah.
reporter doesn't need to hear that. But on the other hand, then look, Ukraine's winning the information war,
Oh,
and it's
definitely.
not even close. Uh, I don't know how to compare that to what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's difficult, but maybe that is the answer. Maybe they got it figured out. I was always worried that our location would be given away, right? These massive bases in Afghanistan that have been there for 10 years. You can find on Google Earth, right? What's the reporter going to do? But who knows? Maybe that's the move. It seems pretty open book.
Yeah, and it's garnered a lot of support too. I think exposure to war can really help a lot if you have a few things. So like if you are treating your soldiers properly and you are trying to give them everything they need, I think people across the world can see that, and like pictures and videos of like the frontline positions getting out are less hurtful for the war effort and more helpful sort of thing. Like there's a picture recently of Bakhmut, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's a Ukrainian soldier, and he's head to toe covered in mud, and he's in a trench, and he's eating from a tin can with a fork. And then there's another series of pictures that he took, and it's like the trees in the front line, and they're all like shaved off at the top, just cut down by artillery. And then there's another picture where they're in the trench walking, and it's just like ankle, like knee deep in mud. And and showing those pictures to the world really garnered a lot of support I think, at least for the soldiers in Bakhmut, where it's like, look what these guys are enduring. Like the Ukrainian government's trying as hard as they can to get these guys the boots they need and the proper cold weather gear that they need, but they need more help. And I've seen like a big influx on social media of people trying to get medical supplies to them, trying to get cold weather gear and stuff like that. Atlas Global Aid has done an excellent job lately of being like the last mile delivery guys. They just delivered a pair of night vision to a surgeon in Bakhmut. So there's definitely more support now out there because these soldiers on the front lines have their phones. Um, and then on the flip side of that, when you don't run a war as well as you can, like in some areas on the Russian side, showing pictures and videos really hurts the perception for that side. Like I spoke to a Russian conscript earlier in the summer, and he was describing like an apocalypse Mad Max style army camp where there were random tents everywhere and there was like human feces all over the trenches, and that they had like old World War II style like SSH 68 helmets, I think is what they're called, like the old the tin
Metal. Yeah.
the metal helmets, and that they were getting sent out to the trenches with like no first aid kits and like one magazine, no night vision, anything like that. And so they all had their phones confiscated. I'm presumably not for OPSEC reasons, but just like, okay, we can't let people see like the conditions and like the equipment that we're actually issuing out. Um, that's just speculation on my part, but that would be a big reason. But they're supposed to be one of the most powerful militaries in the world, but they're issuing equipment from the 60s.
Well, in the information war, we would be the ones taking phones away.
Yeah.
We would not be the ones saying, let that guy Nick from some other country walk on the base and take
Oh
pictures of
no.
whatever he wants. So it's interesting to think about that. Some combination of OPSEC or not wanting to show the conditions, whatever it is. That'd be our move, you know?
Mm-hmm. Just look at the support that the defenders of Mariupol got, like the Azovstal and stuff like that. I had never seen more support for a single group of people than anything in my life, but for the defenders of Mariupol, because by the end, those guys were drinking out of puddles and eating dog food, and they were not shy to tell the world about it, and they got all the media coverage they could ever need. I mean, it's still the ending was not, I guess, what they wanted, but I believe that they survived that encounter because of the media coverage, because inside they had their phones, they were talking to people on the outside. I was talking to Major Boden Krotovich of the Azov Regiment the last month of that, and he gave me some pretty like up to date updates on what was going on there as well.
That could have been 100% KIA, just as a comparison for people. This was the siege in the southern part of Ukraine early
Yep.
in the war. It came under siege quickly.
Right
And
away.
yeah, I mean, it was a few weeks in, it was like, uh-oh, Mariupol's about to be completely cut off. And yeah, the fact that they were taken prisoner, I'm sure they weren't having, it wasn't great conditions. And I'm sure some died in captivity and a lot died in the fight. But honestly, the fact that it wasn't 100% killed in that siege is big.
Yeah, and it's just so weird, like being able to talk to those people as it's happening.
Oh,
Like here I've got in my book on page 252 from Major Boden Krotovich. We spoke the situation at 1645 55 2022. Enemy has broken through. Heavy fighting is ongoing. Enemy has taken parts of the factory. They are using human meat and wave tactics. The fighting has not stopped. On the territory of the factory remain women, children, and heavily wounded. And he told me at that time the situation of the battle that was ongoing. And it just blows my mind like how technology can bring us together like that. And I can communicate with someone in like a Stalingrad-esque type of battle as it's going on.
that's been one of the arguments that I was reading about. The cyber warfare is so over my head.
Oh, me too.
But, but there's a podcast recently where guys are talking about the cyber war, and one of the big arguments is that by allowing by allowing the internet to exist in Ukraine right now and not shutting down cell networks, that kind of thing happens. People are sending reports out of Mariupol. We're like, you don't need that. You're not doing anything with that that's necessarily changing the tactical situation, but it can then be blasted out to a couple 100,000 people on Instagram, and that message gets out in the blink of an eye.
Hmm.
Otherwise, those guys in that situation specifically, they just die silently.
Yeah. I think that's one of the bigger parts of this war is that people are not dying silently anymore. At least not everyone is. And I think that's what someone in my position, it's a little more difficult to deal with, I guess.
What do
Because
you mean?
um
I'm not sure which part you're talking about there.
people not dying silently anymore. Like they're communicating with the outside, and
They're
like
not number. They're not
me
a
in
number.
yeah, they're not just a number anymore. And it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's like, how do I describe this in a way that doesn't make me sound horrible? It's like it brings the war into everyone's household now because people are not just a number anymore. You can see videos of these people dying. There's a video I saw on Telegram recently of this Ukrainian soldier. It just came out. He was fighting in the trench line. One of his comrades got wounded out in no man's land. He crawls out to save his friend, rolls his buddy over. His friend is dead, and you can hear it in his breathing, like change, like the realization, like, oh my god, like my friend is dead, and he gets shot as well. And then the other like 10 minutes of the footage is him laying there, half looking at the ground, half looking at his dead friend, and just wheezing until he stops and it goes dark. And it's like, that's what I mean when people aren't dying silently anymore. Is now that there's 500,000 people saw that in the first day, and it's part of the information war. You could definitely use that for propaganda for either side. Um, but for me, at least personally, I view all of these videos, whether it be a drone dropping a grenade in a fighting hole or something as personal as that man's last 10 minutes of life, I view it all as human beings. And I think that's what we're kind of losing in a sense is not our humanity, but our sensitivity to the situation. I remember like a year ago, like there'd be combat footage coming out, and you would like at first. I remember watching videos of fighting going on in Ukraine and being shocked at it, where it's like, oh my gosh, like that javelin just blew up that tank. Like there was a crew of people in there, and now I don't bat an eye. Like it's just another video of a tank getting blown up, or it's another video of a grenade getting dropped in a trench and like soldiers getting blown up. So the information war is definitely at the same time, I think, desensitized a lot of people because there's just so much of this graphic violence out there now, and we're seeing so much of it that it's we're just all being desensitized one way or another.
Yeah, during kind of peak Iraq and Afghanistan, there was drone footage coming out left and right, but it was all infrared or IR. So you'd see the enemy moving, but you really couldn't see their face. You'd see a body. You could tell. You could see the RPG and stuff like that. That felt so when you'd see that footage back home or people sitting around, it was all over YouTube. Like it didn't have quite the connection, but this is very personal. I mean, there's videos where you can see the person's face.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just some military history stuff. There's been times throughout history where, well, I think it's even today, right? We try to suppress kind of the graphic stuff that's publicly available. One of the arguments for that is that the public would lose their appetite for war. If the Americans saw the bloody beaches of Tarawa or Peleliu, they might not agree to keep this fight going in World War II. Do you see that happening at all? just from what you picked up between Russia, Ukraine, maybe even folks outside of those two countries? Is this amount of gore and graphic footage decreasing people's desire to keep the fight going?
I think yes and no. I think the footage of the enemy dying, everyone wants to like throw like some music on and just shoot out there. Like look at us killing this enemy soldier sort of thing. But then everyone is much more hesitant to share videos of their side dying. Like I'll get comments all the time. Like I'll upload something um on Battles and Beers, and it'll be like Russian soldiers getting blown up by a tank or something, and no one says anything. But then like you'll put like a Ukrainian soldier stepping on a landmine, and everyone's like, "This is disrespectful. Like you should this is a human being," sort of thing. And so you can definitely see the dehumanization for one side, but not the other. And I guess that's the point of war fighting and the information war. But
And on Instagram, your audience is going to be more, I'm sure it's over 50% United States
yeah,
and probably a very small percentage in Russia.
yeah.
Is,
Yep. And then because I can see exactly how many views I get from other places on my website. And so there are views from Russia coming in, and they're usually more quiet. I think, I don't know, they might have some government jobs.
never know.
So
I've had some comments on videos that have been very thoughtful from people. Now, I guess I don't know if they're actually from Russia or live in Russia or
mhm.
not. They say they do. No way to really confirm that. But there's plenty of pretty nasty comments, just internet in general. But I've had some very thoughtful Russians leave commentary that, um, you know, things I want to see this end.
Yeah.
I don't want to see this violence continue. I don't have anything against the Ukrainian people, like things like that that are humanity, I guess is what I'll say.
Yeah, it's
I don't mean that to sound like it's 50% of the audience. That is
oh yeah, definitely.
the rare
It's
one that comes in,
definitely
but they're out there.
there's gonna have to come a point where people kind of come back to reality so they can talk about things, and they see each other as human beings again. Um just like how now like we can talk about German citizens and stuff, and like yeah, they're human beings. They had some pretty messed up people in their ranks, but like everyone in that army was a human being, sort of thing. And we're just not ready to have conversations like that yet, with this war, especially the people living through it. Even myself, I have like I was pretty shocked by what I saw in Ukraine, like what the Russians were doing and what they had done in some places. I went to Bucha and Mashun and Irpin, in those cities in the earlier part of the invasion, and they were just a lot of those places were just completely destroyed, or the people living in them were just absolutely traumatized. And it's so weird because like the Russians, for a fact, did commit crimes that were just seemed so like outdated, if that makes sense, like World War II style crimes and
Yeah, I
like
know what you mean.
shootings and stuff like that, where it's like that stuff happened in our like grandfather's time, like yeah, there's like terrible stuff like that goes on in the Middle East and Africa now, but it's like people are like, it's always been that way there, like the civilized Western world, like they just are the like Russia and like Ukraine, like we think of that as like two in the modern times to like kind of comprehend that these horrible like atrocities are happening there. And I think that's what's shocking a lot of people. Like I remember there was a video of a couple Russian soldiers leading like 7 or 8 Ukrainians behind a wall in Bucha, and they just gunned them all down for like literally no reason. And then there was drone footage later of like all those like people just laying like dead. And it's like what was the I think that's what people have a hard time trying to figure out is why. Like, why are these crimes being committed? Where it's like, I've spoken to Russians. Like, I spoke to a company commander who went to a Paramore concert in California, and then his peers are out doing these things, and it's like how it's like we live in we're supposed to live in a modern global society, and it's like how are people still able to do these things? I interviewed a guy while we were there. His name's Anton, and he was briefly a civilian prisoner of the Russians.
Was he
And
at Buka? I think I've heard of this guy.
yep, he's in my book.
Okay.
Yep, he was briefly a prisoner of the Russians, and they used him to draw out Ukrainian snipers. They put a Russian Kevlar on him and a plate carrier, and they sent him out on a tank, like to go. They told him to go like rummage around on a tank and draw sniper fire. And it's like that's stuff from like World War II, or like I can't believe that's happening. Like picture if we did
That's
that.
Enemy at the Gates in that the movie Enemy at the
Yeah,
Gates. They did something like that, right? And you're like,
yeah,
oh my gosh, how
exactly.
could
Enemy
you?
at the gates. Like picture if we did that to like an Afghan civilian. Okay, we're gonna put this Marine Kevlar and uniform on you and go have you walk down the road till you get shot at. Like that would be national, like global news as soon as anyone found out. And it's like this story's been out there and no one's talking about it, sort of thing.
That's the kind of thing that makes me nervous about this conflict because that's like a level beyond anything we've dealt with in a while.
Yeah.
Um, Again, it's hard to put it on the same level as what we saw with Islamic State, with Taliban, with Al Qaeda. It's a different fight, and that's the kind of stuff that's hard to square. Like, how are we gonna come back from that? We have to.
I
I
think
think.
I think what makes it so hard for people to digest is it's a uniformed enemy doing it, and they are acting on behalf of
Sure.
one of the most powerful countries on earth. Um, I think people just sort of accepted and didn't really bat eyes that the Taliban and ISIS and Al Qaeda were doing these things because they're terror groups, you know. But I think that's a big reason why now like the hashtag Russia is a terrorist state thing is being blown up is because of stuff like that.
Are you planning to go back at all?
Uh
Hoping to go back, maybe.
yes. So um there were some groups in Ukraine doing some great work, like Task Force 31, uh, Dark Horse, and many others. I'm sorry, up the top of my head, it's hard to remember. Um, but I'd like to go back, help them document some of what they're doing, as well as tons more stories in central Ukraine and eastern Ukraine that I didn't get a chance to document. So I'm going to start fundraising, I think, to fund my own way over there this time. It'll probably take a couple months. I'd like to go over in like March or April. Um, we'll see. I definitely want to go back, but when is the question. Funding is definitely the issue. I do Battles and Beers as a hobby. I have a different job that pays the bills that's not related to this at all. So in order to do Battles and Beers in Ukraine for an extended period of time, I'd probably have to quit current job, and that would I would need a couple months worth of funds to stay afloat while I'm doing that. But I think that this work is important and that it needs to get done, and I'm good at it, I think. So
I agree. I don't. I'm sure there's other people documenting some of these individual stories. I haven't come across anybody that's doing as much as you are, especially when it's not just the military but civilians as well. I mean, there's some great firsthand accounts from a lot of people in this war, but you're building a library that's, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but 20, 30, 40 years down the road could be really, really valuable for people to be able to
that's what
look
I'm
back
that's what I'm trying to do is
and
preserve these stories.
valuable to society. I didn't mean
Mhm.
valuable in
Yeah,
a monetary sense.
yeah. It's the same way I look at books and stuff now of like World War II, like Adam Makos's Voices from the Pacific. To me, is just solid gold because it's got all these stories in it. That's these personal experiences from the war in the Pacific and World War II, and it's like I'm just trying to replicate that for as many conflicts as I can.
That's something I used to go on rants about. Is you'll never hear anybody say we've just got too many first person accounts from the First World War. I
Yeah.
wish we didn't have this many,
Yeah.
individual soldier stories. That's never the case. You always want more. And why not? Right now, you've got the ability to do it. The fact that you could do it from your house in the United States, like, it's awesome. It's impressive work. Glad you're
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, me too. And I enjoy doing it too. It's pretty tough some days, especially like being like caught in the middle sometimes where it's like I've got friends on both sides and I'm trying to remain as unbiased as I can, and that the sad nature of this war too is that people are dying. Um, a large part of the book now I consider to be an obituary and last words of some people. I'd say I haven't checked up on everyone, but there are at least 20 people I've interviewed in the book so far, and there's about 300 that I interviewed, but about at least 20 have died since I've spoken to them. And that's just ones I've checked up on and been informed that they died.
Well, book's worth checking out. Where can people find the book? Where can people find you? What you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm primarily on Instagram. You can check it out. Battles dot and dot beers. There's a link tree there to my first book, my second book, my online shop, and my website. You can check the book out on there. Yeah,
I like it, man. We'll put links to all of those in the description. But Nick, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. And yeah, just really appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work, man.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For sure.